Now remember, this teaching is completely useless if you do nothing with it, okay? This teaching has got to get into your heart to help you to really understand your identity and who he expects you to be and desires you to be and what that future looks like. And then to inspire you to make the necessary changes from what you are now to what you're supposed to be, to who you are and to what he is. What have we said often about the Torah? The Torah blesses you, keeps you safe, and is the instrument, the vehicle that transforms you from who you are into who he is. And so this is what we're all about here. So this is the time, we call this the Afterburn. We'll take questions and comments. I would like the questions and comments to be completely focused on either today's teaching or any of the other parts of this particular teaching as we concluded it today. If you have questions about anything else, especially live streamers, some of you don't know me very well, and so you probably have a lot of questions, you're welcome to call us or email us or Facebook message us or whatever. Robert will put ways to reach us on there. And so you can find me on Facebook, Steve Berkson. You can find me through email, steve@mtoi.org. You can call us. Our phone number's on our website, etc.
I was glad to hear you say what you said about the Talmud and the Zohar and Yashar and some of the extra writings. It really disturbs me that, of course, we must hold the Torah as our supreme source of authority.
Amen.
But what really disturbs me, I've seen on Facebook and the internet lately, a lot of garbage regarding especially the Talmud. People are saying it's vile, it's evil, it's written by demonic man, and I don't think these people know what they're talking about. They're just blaspheming and bearing false witness. And of course, they're speaking out of total ignorance, and a lot of them are Messianic people. And we have to be careful what we say and be careful what we condemn and how we say it. But of course, again, the Torah is number one.
Amen.
Always, first and foremost.
Amen.
That's all I wanted to say. Let's just be careful.
Listen, if that's all, that was enough. That was good. Look, here's the thing. I'm not in any way denigrating any of these books or attacking them in any way. What I'm trying to tell you is this. The only time, because some people will say to me, well, when I talked about Deuteronomy and, the authority of Judah and the scepter from Genesis, where it says the scepter doesn't depart and all these other things, and coming to leadership in Deuteronomy, and what are we supposed to do with that in Deuteronomy 17 and all these things. Well, what about all of that? Well, here's the thing. I don't go and look towards Judah if the scripture is clear about things. It's when it's not. Like, for example, we're told to wear tzitzit. There's not a single verse tells us what that looks like. Okay? We have no idea what they look like, how many strings, or whatever. It doesn't say. So I can go to Judah and ask these things. There's not a single verse that talks about how to kosher kill an animal. There's not a single verse about a lot of things that we don't know how to do. And so those are the things that we might go to Judah about. Okay? I don't turn to them for everything. Remember, Deuteronomy says when a matter is too difficult for you to discern and not know what to do, then you would go and elevate to the next level. By the way, don't go to Judah first. Go up the chain of command in your ministry. Go to your elders, go to your rabbi, pastor, whatever. Work the way up. Now, the problem is a lot of you guys will run everywhere but where you're supposed to go first. The first place you go is YouTube, or you go to Facebook, and you're like, I counsel people every day who tell me, well, I took counsel from this person and that person. Well, who are these people you're taking counsel from, and why are you getting 16 opinions? Go get yourself a relationship with a proper, anointed, appointed counselor and ask that person the questions. Don't ask 75 people especially these are all people that they don't even really know. They found them on the internet or somewhere or whatever. So why are you listening to them? Well, they're telling me I'm living in sin, or they're telling me I'm doing this time. Well, who are they? What are their qualifications? Why don't we just listen to everybody? Now, as far as the attacks on these things like the Talmud, look, almost everybody that's attacking has never read it. Oh, no, they're going to post copies of English translations, a little excerpt circled with notes on it or something, and think that means that they're missing the context. I could do the same thing. I can go to Ephesians, Galatians, and Romans, and Hebrews and just take one verse, right? Circle it out for you and say, look, see, this is what Paul's saying. I mean, I could, like many do, I could make him a heretic. I could make him sound terribly like a heretic by just taking a few things he said, circle them, and take them out of context. So we got to be very careful. Look, those who claim, all of you out there, if someone's claiming they know the Talmud, you need to ask them, number one, are they talking about the Jerusalem or are they talking about the Babylonian? Oh, you didn't know there was two? Well, there was two. That's number one. Number two, are they quoting out of the Mishnah or the Gemara? Well, what's that? I don't know. Oh, well, you don't know. Okay. Well, neither does the person who you're looking at either. They don't know either. Okay? Again, you have to understand the context by reading. Almost always, it's like most of the Talmud is case law, C-A-S-E, case, like an attorney in a law firm would have shelves and shelves of books of case law, like precedents that has happened in a case. Okay? So everybody knows Roe v. Wade is the thing that had to do with abortion, right? That's a case that was quoted about abortion, right? Okay, well, there are cases being dealt with in the Talmud. And so if you don't read the arguments from both sides or 5 different sides arguing in the case, but just see one little piece of it, well, you really don't know what's going on. And often what's being quoted is not the conclusion, it's just one of the people's arguments. Guess what? I've heard a lot of attorneys out there arguing on TV about stuff. I've heard a lot of crazy stuff. So yeah, maybe some of the people who argued in the Talmud said some crazy, hideous things. I don't doubt that. There are some crazy, hideous people that get involved in the arguments over what we should or shouldn't do. But that doesn't mean that's what was decided to be done. So be careful with that. Okay, but I have people tell me, oh, I've read the Talmud. I said, really? No, you haven't. You've read somebody quote something that quoted something from somebody who quoted something. Okay, if you had it, first of all, to read it, you'd have to know Hebrew. Okay, you'd have to know Hebrew. And you'd have to understand that the thing would take up your whole bookcase. The Talmud is not like this. It's not like a little book. Okay? It's volumes and volumes of stuff. And you'd have to understand how to read the page with the writings and the commentaries around it, a little piece in the middle with the square, and you'd have to understand how that all works out. And you'll have to understand all the other things that are all written in these things as you study it. There's a reason why the Jews, if they're studying it in yeshiva, teach Tanakh first, and you got to know the Tanakh inside out before they teach you Talmud, because otherwise you don't understand what's going on in the Talmud. You don't have a Tanakh basis. Same thing with the Zohar and the Kabbalah. No reason to go there till you understand the Tanakh and the Talmud. Then you go to the Kabbalah, and then maybe some of it might make a little bit of sense. Do you need any of this stuff? Absolutely not. So just in case anybody's going to go, well, like Rabbi Steve is just telling everybody we need all this stuff. You don't. I'm just trying to give a perspective that when you hear people attacking it, I promise you 0 of them have a clue what they're talking about because they don't have the ability to read it. Okay? They just don't. They don't know what they're reading. And so you need to know that. All right. Because I've seen on Facebook people like zoomed in on just one little piece of English translation from some book somewhere in the Talmud, blah, blah, blah. And it's just 3 or 4 sentences in a paragraph that they zoomed in on. I don't know what was going on in the rest of the paragraphs. I'd have to go look up that book and that section of Talmud. And I'd have to go and read the whole argument, the whole case to know where that fits. Anyway, see what you stirred up, Rabbi? I'm kidding. It's a Rabbi Tom. No, it was a good question. It's a good point. Okay? But it just hit me when he said the word table, that the word table is often referred to as like the master's table, the idea of the Shulchan Aruch, okay, which is the main piece of Torah observance that really a lot of people use. Okay?
The Jew that lives here and does not want to go back to Israel, does not want to do a teshuvah. I guess that's true, right?
No, teshuvah is not going back to Israel. Aliyah is going back. Making Aliyah is going back to Israel.
And the other term you said was mikvah.
Okay, mikvah
is changing your citizenship.
Right.
Okay, so I thought of the prayer of Solomon when you were talking about all this. in there, of course, you know, it says that when they repented of their sins and they're carried away captive, the prayer was that they could return back to the land of Israel and be in good standing with Yah again.
Correct.
So how can you incorporate what you said with the fact that returning back to Israel represents a fulfillment of that prayer that Solomon gave, at the dedication of the temple?
Okay, I appreciate the question. Okay, there would be no confusion if the Israel that exists today was the Israel that existed then. That Israel does not exist today, okay? The Israel that existed then was the Israel that was under the authority of Shlomo, that was under the authority as they rededicated the temple, under the authority of Torah, under the authority of Elohim. It was under that authority. The Israel that exists since 1948 does not meet those criteria. Okay? So there is no obligation for the Jew to return to Israel at this point. There will be when the two sticks come back together under Yeshua, and we have them, it says there'll be, then one king they'll be under King David again. It'll be because the true King David ultimately is Yeshua being in the type and shadow of that. So yes, when that happens, yes, we will go. But there is no obligation to go until then. The Israel we have now is almost worse than some of the places you live now in the States. Okay? I mean, go to Tel Aviv. You're better off in Chattanooga. Okay, because that place is probably the homosexual capital of the Middle East and the world even. I mean, it's terrible. Terrible things happening in the land. Believe me, when Solomon was making that prayer at the dedication of the temple, he was not figuring on a split Jerusalem with the Dome of the Rock and all the other nonsense going on the Temple Mount. Okay? Yes, the prayer was captivity and return. That return is still prophesied to come. We're still waiting for that. And that's the two sticks of Ezekiel 37. Okay, that's not the yet. Now, if you feel compelled and led to go, go. But don't give the Jews grief who don't go or anybody else grief who doesn't go, because, quite frankly, that's not the place that you're going to want to be, especially when it's going to be ground zero for the worst battle of all time. Okay? I want to go when Yeshua's sitting on the throne. As a matter of fact, nothing will hold me back when Yeshua's sitting on the throne. I will walk, I will swim, I'll make a boat, somehow I'll get there. Okay, Yeshua's on the throne, I'm going. Right now, it's politics, it's worldly people, it's politicians and their nonsense. That's who's on the throne in Israel right now. Okay? And it's not a Torah observant nation. You go there, the majority of Jews in Israel do not keep anything. See, you picture only the ultra-Orthodox and the Orthodox there. You go and live there, and I know people that do, that most of the Jews in Israel don't observe. They don't keep. It's not what you may think until you go and you realize.
All right, we have Samuel Castro says, regarding our old self, once we choose to change citizenship, is it a matter of committing to the death of our old self in our actions and thoughts?
Well, I understood what he said, and basically that's why we go in the water and we bury the old man. And by the way, to Randy's point, and just to clarify to this point, we're not actually changing citizenship in the way that the rest of the world would recognize it. So we can't now say, well, I went in the water and I made these declarations, I'm an Israelite now, you got to let me into Israel. See, they won't recognize that. Okay, what you're doing is you're making a choice for Abba's eyes. Okay, so he will understand that you know what choices you've made. Like when Ruth said, your Elohim is my Elohim, your people, my people, your ways, my ways. That was in essence her changing citizenship. Okay, you're declaring to him that your heart and your actions and your commitment is to Yisrael, the nation that's his nation, not necessarily the nation that's right now in the Middle East. Because that nation is still a disappointment on a grand scale to our Creator, I'm sure. Okay? Because it certainly is a disappointment to most of us when we see what's going on over there. It's not what should be going on.
You touched on Acts 15, verses 19 to 20. Why did they not want to trouble the Gentiles that came to Elohim and then proceed to tell them to abstain from four things? Were they not to follow Torah? She's confused. She's new.
See, I knew if I didn't finish that out, somebody was going to ask that. We've covered this in a lot of other teachings. Okay, Acts 15, we'll cover it here in the Afterburn. See, that would work out because we have these Afterburns now. Okay, Acts 15. Okay, first of all, let's understand what this troubling the Gentiles is. The Jewish community, okay, was not thrilled, just like the prodigal son story. They were not thrilled to let Gentiles come in. And so to make it really challenging, they were insisting that the Gentiles get circumcised before they could even come. In other words, instead of doing it as a sign of commitment after studying and being a ger, a proselyte, a ger, one that was sojourning with and observing and deciding whether or not this is for you. Because remember, in Acts chapter 12, what happened? The ger, when he's ready to commit, then he would get circumcised. The Jews in Acts 15 were changing things a little bit. They said, no, they can't even come to the synagogue at all unless they get circumcised first. So listen to what James says in Acts 15, because that's what the whole argument is about circumcision. Not about whether or not you need to do it, but whether or not you need to do it before you do anything else. It's not step one. It's the commitment step. So here in verse 19, he says, therefore I judge that we should not trouble those among the Gentiles who are turning to Elohim. In other words, you're causing a stumbling or a roadblock to coming in. He says, so look, this is what I judge. I think that what we need to do is write to them to abstain from the defilements of idols, from whoring, from what is strangled, and from blood. Because from ancient days, listen now, from ancient generations, Moses has in every city those proclaiming him, in other words, the Torah, being read in the congregations every Sabbath. It's not like people going, we're declaring Moses, we're declaring Moses. No, they're reading the Torah. The first 5 books is called the Torah, okay? The 5 books of Moses, the Chumash. He says, look, they're going to, as long as they're doing verse 20, they can come and do verse 21. That's what he's saying. Don't harass them that they can't do verse 21 unless they get circumcised first. I mean, these people who are here making this argument must have belonged to our Congress. No, you can't read it till after we pass it. I mean, it's the same dumb thing, right? Oh, no, we got to pass it first, then you can read it. Oh, no, you got to go get snipped and you got to get circumcised, then you can come and find out even if you have any interest in all of this. And here Moses preached. That's so dumb. So now what about verse 20? He's not saying these are the only 4 things that a Gentile needs to do. He's saying these are the 4 things they need to do as a minimum for table fellowship to start coming to the synagogue on the Sabbath. But notice what those 4 things actually he was saying. What he was saying was, instead of just saying you no longer can attend the pagan temples, he made it impossible for them to attend the pagan temples. In other words, he's saying, look, while you're coming to the synagogue on the Sabbath to learn Torah, don't be double-minded and go to the pagan temples at the same time. So what did he do? He said, interesting, notice these 4 things. He said, abstain from idols. So what happened when you went to a pagan temple? There was going to be idols. He says, from whoring, guess what else was at the pagan temple? A temple prostitute. And so they would sleep with this temple prostitute. And then it says, and from things strangled, because then they would strangle an animal and squeeze out its blood and you would drink it. These were common pagan temple rituals in the days of Acts 15. So what did James say? He said, look, here's my decision. Leave them alone. We're only going to ask them to start at the very starting point. At the very minimum, we ask them to do these 4 things. Basically, he said, stop going to the pagan temple. You want to go to the pagan temple? Then don't come to the synagogue. Make a choice. Now, if you're going to the synagogue for a period of time and you realize it's not for you, good. Go back to the pagan temple. That's your choice. But he said, while you're coming to the one, don't come polluted while you're going to the other. So no idols, no whoring, no strangled things, and no drinking of blood. Because otherwise you may say, of all the millions of things that Yaakov could have picked, that James could have picked, why those 4 things? Because that's what happened in a pagan temple. I mean, it makes logical sense if you understood what was going on in those days. Because some people say, well, it's because it's the minimum for table fellowship. Well, he could have said other things that would have been the minimum for table fellowship as well. Because notice he didn't say anything about eating unclean. He didn't say a word. They could still eat unclean and show up because, after all, they didn't know anything about unclean. He said no idols, no whoring, no strangled, and no blood. Okay? And by blood, he wasn't talking about kosher like blood. He means that literally they would drink blood. They would slaughter an animal, they would strangle it, and they would take out its blood, and you would drink it as a part of these rituals. Very crazy stuff that they were doing. We think of that today as crazy. It was normal back then. It was quite normal. Okay? I mean, you go, but listen, they did that stuff. Okay? Because they believed that they could get the strength and the power from that animal into themselves by drinking its blood. And so drinking blood of animals and drinking the blood of your enemies and stuff was a very common thing. Very common thing. Okay, so hopefully that answered the Acts 15 question. So when it comes to troubling, the troubling was trying to get them to circumcise before they even know what they were getting into.
Who is the real Israelite? She's hearing so many things, and she's confused about that.
Okay, just type it in real quick. Ask her if she's if she's watched the other 9 parts. If you haven't watched the other 9 parts, go back and watch the 9 parts. It's explained. If you've already watched everything up to this point and you still don't understand, then contact us. You're Israelite by choice, not by birth. But I get the sense that you probably haven't watched the other 9. You're probably one of the newer people. Okay? You're Israelite by choice. In other words, you demonstrate your citizenship by your actions which you choose to take. You don't do anything generally by accident. Okay, you don't accidentally eat pork or accidentally break the Sabbath or accidentally murder somebody. Commandments are not broken generally by accident. No, sure, you may run into a pole or hit another car by accident, or you may trip and fall by accident, but we're talking about breaking commandments generally doesn't happen by accident. And so you're making a commitment to guard, observe, and remember to keep the commandments. That makes you an Israelite. Okay? Now, you're going to hear from the black community about the Hebrew Israelite thing that it's only the black people. You're going to hear from the white supremacists, it's only the white people. See, you got both sides, right? You're going to hear from the Jews. You're going to hear from the church. Everybody thinks they're Israel. Everybody thinks they're Israel. Now, all of them can be, but they're not all Israel. Black people, white people, yellow people, orange people, they could all be Israel. Church people, Jewish people, they could all be Israel. By making a choice to stop being whatever they were labeling themselves with and start being Torah observant followers of Yeshua. Then doesn't matter whatever they were labeled as before. You could be old, you could be young, you could be fat, you could be skinny, you could be tall, you could be short, you could be male, you could be female. It doesn't matter. You could be wealthy, you could be poor. It's what are you choosing to do? That's what matters. So yes, you're not going to have a lack of opinions out there about what makes you Israel or not, who Israel really is. That's the point of the 10-part teaching we just did. If you still have problems with it, that's okay. I'll be patient. Call us, email us, something, and we'll try to help you out.
In reference to what you're talking about in Yaakov about the 4 elements, would you, in modern day times, consider going to the temples that are not of Torah observant, for example, the Saturday or the Sunday worships? Because my understanding as a Christian, quote unquote, drinking the blood of Jesus brought a sense of power. And so...
Oh, like the Catholic thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So when you're incorporating walking in Elohim, in the truth, and observing these other ones, we are bringing confusion into our being, which could be why James is putting a separation in the temples to stop the confusion. It goes back to the scripture where Yahweh talks about to love what is good and to hate what is evil.
If we had a more, what's the word I'm looking for? More visible and cohesive community, we may be able to be stronger when a new person comes in and say, okay, while you're here and you're trying to figure this out, we would encourage you to stop going to your Baptist, Methodist, Catholic, Evangelical, whatever. Stop going there while you're figuring this out so you're not hearing 2 messages, 2 voices, all that confusion. And I've often recommended that to people because, the nature of the teaching, though, is that you're going to get frustrated with one or the other pretty quickly. So that decision is going to end up happening fairly quickly anyway. But no, I don't think we have authority under this. This was under a very well-structured and well-organized early assembly, okay, between the assemblies that were out there and the Jerusalem headquarters, and they had a very well-organized structure and authority so that they could deal with these things, okay? And so, and by the way, it's not that he needed the Gentiles to stop doing this to come in. He wouldn't have made this decision except to appease the freaked-out Jews. To say, fine, we'll do something at least to calm you down. They need to do this, this, and this if they want to come in. So that doesn't make it Torah. He just was trying to appease the guys who were really violently angry with the idea that Gentiles were coming in. He said, fine, well, here's what we're going to do. we'll make a decision for our body at this time, in this era, in this time in the world, where for Gentiles to come in to these Jewish synagogues, okay, remember, people come here, I'm the only Jew, more or less, okay? How many Jews in the room? Okay, 5, okay, who actually have Jewish background. Okay, so we got 4 or 5 of us out of 40. Okay, so it's not a Jewish congregation by any means. These were Jewish synagogues that people were now coming into. The Jews were a little uncomfortable with these guys coming, you know, with knowing they just walked out of the pagan temple the day before, the same day, whatever they did. So James is making a decision for those under his responsibility, those under his authority, to say, look, this is what we're going to do to handle the problem. What's the problem? The problem was you guys wanting to not let them in so that they can learn. That's a problem. Because after all the prophecy said that they get to come in. So I don't think you would have seen this decision if there wasn't an issue. In other words, this isn't James just saying, I have an edict. We now need to tell people who are coming they can't do this, this, and this. No, he's saying, look, to handle this fight, this is what we're going to do. So we're seeing and observing how he handled the issue in his time. How do we apply that today? I don't know that there's any way we can handle that today. What we can do is be aware is if somebody is coming and they're really bringing, we've had this happen where people come and they bring their evangelical or their Jehovah's Witness or their Catholic or their Methodist or their Baptist ideas and mindsets in with them and they can't let it go and they're pushing that instead of listening. You're supposed to be, and James is pointing this out in Acts 15, if they want to come to the synagogue to hear, learn, and understand so they can make a decision, great. However, if they're now going to push an agenda of their own, problem. Now, he didn't say that exactly, but that's the way I would read it.
Sarah Beth wanted to know, are the coheirs like Yehuda and Ephraim, were they the coheirs?
No. In other words, Yehuda and Ephraim are the heirs. Okay, that's Israel are the heirs. And so we get to be, if you weren't actually of the 12 tribes, okay, then you get to be grafted in and be heirs like their heirs. So you're co-heirs, you're equal. You're heirs just like they are. Okay, so then you're like your Abraham's seed. Okay, because the heirs from Abraham went down to Isaac, went down to Jacob, went down to Joseph, to Ephraim. And so you have the heirs. Well, those are the bloodline heirs. Of course, even the bloodline heirs don't necessarily get anything if they're not so doing. They got to be found so doing.